Thank you for coming. Can everyone hear me okay? Just checking. Awesome. Okay, so based on how fast I talked during my lightning talk, we could be only here for about 5 minutes. So we'll see, because I was really going for some reason. Anyway, so first up, who am I? I'm Buddy Lindsey Jr. I grew up in Oklahoma, and I run a site called DjangoCon. I currently have about 150 Django screencasts for people to learn and continue their education on Django, and I'm continuously adding new videos, so I ask that people check it out and subscribe if they want to. I would be appreciative of that. I'm also a senior software engineer at a company in Tulsa called Summit ESP, and I do mostly Django work and a little bit of full stack as well. And I'm also a lifelong learner. The two latest things I've been learning about is sustainable farming and permaculture, and also cryptocurrency trading. My wife has constantly said she's always curious every 6 months about what new thing I'm going to try to learn, because I always buy some new book that she never knows what it's going to be. So with that, this is my wife and my daughter. My daughter's 10 months old. My wife's Melissa, and our daughter is Grace. And I took this picture on the way up, and my daughter's like, "Why are you taking pictures of me?" That's her expression, I think. So with that, let's get into it. So this is about ViewSets, and in Django REST framework. I feel like one of the best places to start to really understand ViewSets, because this talk is about maintainability of code, aesthetics of code, and being able to read the code really fast and quickly grok and understand what's going on. We'll start at the beginning, where you have the anatomy of an endpoint for a single model. Generally, you have, to deal with a single model, you have two get HTTP verbs that you deal with for doing a list of everything and the details of a specific object out of the database. You have a post for create, and you have a put for update, and delete for deleting. And so kind of those are the 5 verbs that we deal with in dealing with models and the different CRUD operations. And those are generally made up with 2 views and 2 URLs. Your create and list are generally something like API/coins. It's kind of the base of something, and then your detail, view, your update, and your delete are, say, API, coins, and the ID of whatever that object is. So those are kind of some of the basics. Everyone is aware of that. I like to start from the beginning to know where we're going. So our views are generally doing a few things. They're determining what verb is being used and how to route that properly. It's checking permissions, if there's any permissions to be set. It's getting the relevant data that you're after to be able to display it to the user. It's generally serializing the data using some sort of serializer, and using the regular model serializers or a third-party type serializer. It's running any filters that you're wanting to do. So you're trying to filter your data with Django Filters. Your views are generally handling that as well. And then they also do the action that we want them to do. It's either getting the data to display it, it's deleting it, it's updating or creating a new object in our database. So it's doing a lot of work when we're doing things. And we have to handle all that somehow. Our URLs are basically doing one thing. They're routing the information that we're sending it to somewhere else. And I have route in quotes because we'll see that here in a little bit. So kind of the one difference that there is with ViewSets is you're declaring a single URL instead of 2. You have basically one view instead of 2 or more. And you're only working with code declarations. And I'll kind of explain what that is a little more when we actually get to the kind of demo. And I can kind of show you what's going on. And then again in the demo, we're going to take 59 lines of code, including our imports, of using function-based views with Django REST framework down to 22 lines, again including imports. So it's taking a lot of code, simplifying it, and making it a lot easier to understand. The good thing about this is you can be able to more quickly grok all of your endpoints. Where I work at Summit ESP, we have a single-page application, and we're converting it from an old code base to a new code base based on Django REST framework. And we have a lot of endpoints, and we're constantly adding more. And we're not only backing our single-page application, we're also backing an offline client that we have as well that we wrote. So people out in the field doing work can sync down information onto their local computer, do stuff without having an internet connection, and then can push that information back up at a later date. And those are hitting the exact same endpoints that we have for our single page application. So they're being heavily used and in multiple ways to accomplish kind of the exact same thing. And so when you're dealing with a lot of endpoints and it needs to have the robustness to handle at least those two scenarios, you need to be able to understand them really quickly. And then you also need a common pattern to create all your new endpoints, because when we add a new page to our site and to the offline client, we can generally create anywhere from 1 to 5 or 6 different endpoints, and we have a lot more stuff in our roadmap to add to the site. And so it's something that we really need to make sure that we get well, we understand it well, and we have a pattern for not only us to follow in the future, but for our future developers and future team members to be able to come on board, see what's going on, and kind of replicate exactly what we've done and understand a common thing. So with that, let's actually take a look at a little bit of a demo. And we're going to go on a journey. We're going to go from function-based views, and we're going to look at kind of how everything is gone and how everything is done with a function-based view, what it looks like when people convert it to a class-based view, and then finally what it looks like as a view set. And you'll see. And then the last thing I'm going to show is how we have developed a process of testing view sets that we feel is a good way to test without over-testing. That's not that slide. Okay, so let's see if I can do this. Everyone see that? Okay, cool. So I'm using presentation mode in PyCharm. Never used it before until today, so we'll see how well this goes. So kind of starting from the beginning, we have our model. It's a very basic Django model. Name, symbol, price in US dollars, price based against the Bitcoin for doing a cryptocurrency coin, character field, decimal fields, and then we have our string representation. So when we look at it in the shell or the admin, we know what it looks like. Very, very basic. Okay, might not work out too well. Exit. Let's do it this way. So we have our serializer. It's a standard Django model, Django REST framework model serializer. Coin serializer. It's a model serializer. We set our model and the fields that we want to bring in to be able to display to our users. And then in this case, we have our URLs. We're pulling in 2 function-based views. We're setting it to our first URL to be able to get our list and be able to create our coin object. And we have our one for our ID to get the detail and be able to do a delete and update. And then we have our views here. Okay. All right, so here's our imports. We'll just ignore those. So the first thing we want to do is, so let's say we're new to the code base and we kind of want to understand, what is this doing, because we have this type of code everywhere for all of our API points. Well, we go to our URLs, we say, okay, API coins, we go to the coin list. Now we're at our coin list view. Well, there's login that's required. Okay, that's good information. CSRF exempt. Okay, that's good information. Now we know that we don't have to have a CSRF token on doing a post. Then the first thing we look, okay, we're doing a get. We're getting our data. We're applying all the filters that we might want to apply. And then we're serializing the data based on the last filter that we applied with the query set. We're setting the many equal to true. Okay, I mean, if we're used to this, we're getting a lot of information fairly quickly, but if we're not that used to it, we're probably having to look up a lot of different things to try to really understand what's going on. So then we're returning a JSON response with that data. Okay, now we're doing a post. We're checking for the post. We're doing a parse of the data, serializing it, checking if it's valid, and then saving. Okay, now we have that. Let's go on to the next one. Oh, we're doing our login required again. We're doing a CSRF exempt again. Getting our details. We're passing in the request and the primary key. Now we're getting the data out of the database. If it doesn't exist, we're 404ing. Okay. We're getting our get, serialize, return response. And now we're checking for put. Parsing, serialize, is valid, save. Returning our response either with data or a 400 status if there's an error. And finally, if there's a delete, we're deleting the data out of the database and returning that it was deleted. Very common function-based views, but there's a lot of code to it, and if you want to do anything custom in there, it's going to make this longer and more complicated. And when you have a lot of code like this, at some point you're going to wonder, like, well, where do I put custom information when dealing with my actual model data and how I specifically save models? So one scenario might be is you're doing a many-to-many object and you're passing in your JSON request subdata that needs to create new objects. Well, when you have a lot of information in here, you might be tempted to try to create all of those objects and do all of that stuff inside of your view, when in reality the best place to actually do that is in your serializer, because you might use that same serializer in multiple different views and you want to handle that chunk of JSON inside of your serializer somewhere else. So this leaves you an opportunity to do some poor design choices. This is still valid and still works, and at the end of the day, is going to be fine as long as you understand the caveats to it. Let's quickly looking at our Django filters. We're just doing a simple filter for the coin. So just doing basically a case-insensitive exact match for the name. Anyway, just fairly basic stuff. And then in this one, we're doing a bit filter in case for some reason we wanted to filter out every single result unless the name of it had bit in it. This was just something arbitrary I came up with just to show an example. So let's move on to look at our class-based views. So our URLs have slightly changed a bit. We're doing our coin list view and coin detail view. We're doing our as view here because they're class-based views. We're not calling the functions directly. So in our views, we've actually slimmed it up a lot. We have our coin list view. It's inheriting from list create API view from Django REST framework. Now we see we have permission classes, and we're checking for authentication. Awesome. We're setting our serializer. So now we know that this is going to serialize anything that comes in based on the coin serializer as the top level serializer. Again, as I was describing here a minute ago, if you're dealing with many-to-many data or related data and you handle that in your serializer, you don't have to override anything in your views here because your serializer will just kind of quote-unquote magically handle it the way you want it to handle it. And by default, Django REST framework does not handle that, and you have to handle that somewhere yourself. That could be a completely different discussion for another presentation because there are some headaches involved in that. So there's also the filters that I was just showing you. You generally start with a Django filter backend, and here we just added our bit filter as an example. We have our query set in here, so we know, hey, this view is going to start with this query set, and everything that it does beyond that is going to be a derivative of this query set. And then finally we have the filter class, which is the coin filter, and that's kind of the main filter if we want to filter individual fields. And we can do some other custom things that are kind of like the primary filter of this view. So coin detail view is very similar. We're doing retrieve, update, destroy API view. So we've now determined that in one line that this view will get the data, update the data, and destroy the data for a specific object in the database or model in the database. It's going to be authenticated. It's going to use the coin serializer as its root coin or as its root serializer, and it's going to again start the filtering based on the coin object. So now if we compare our class-based views with our function-based views, we've gotten the exact same information from reading this that we did in the function-based views as we did with the class-based views. We just did it a lot faster, and it makes more sense once we understand how class-based views work, and we don't necessarily have the opportunity to inject code that doesn't need to be in the views in the first place, because we're kind of declaring these things are going to happen in our class-based views, and these are the attributes that need to be here, and we don't necessarily want to do anything else. This is what we want. So, and this is why I'm a proponent of class-based views in general, because it can lead to drier code and better organization of the code. So finally, let's jump to our view sets. All right. So here we go. We have our imports at the top, and now we have our coin view set, and we only have one view. And so that's why it's a view set. It's combining multiple views into one. And we can quickly tell we're doing a create, we're doing a list, we're doing an update, we're doing a retrieve, we're doing a destroy, and everything is being based on a generic view set. We've now quickly determined exactly what this view is going to do. Again, we have the permission classes. We have a coin serializer that the root view is going to work on. We have our two filters, query set, and our main filter class. So now we've more quickly determined what all is going on. We've kind of seen a progression. The long form function-based views to this view set that's only a few lines of code, and you quickly understand and quickly see what's going on. And in reality, let's say I needed to do like a market data view set, I would copy and paste this chunk of code and then change all the information, and now I have my complete view system in the views file done for the market data. The only thing I have to do now is go in and add URLs. So that's where things get a little bit tricky compared to regular views in Django, is you have to deal with a router inside of Django REST framework and being able to route information to different places properly. Generally, you can survive with using just the default router. I have only ever written a custom router for the exercise of writing a custom router to understand what it does. I have not needed to do one in practice. If anyone has, please let me know, because I'd love to have a conversation and understand that piece better of why someone would need that. But basically, you instantiate a new router, you register a URL point of, say, coins in this place, because we're doing API/coins, and you set the view set that you want to use, and so now whatever you have, you're going to do coins slash, and it's going to do everything else. That router is going to figure out, hey, is there an extension on that URL for a primary key? Yes, okay. Now I need to go to, say, that second class-based view in a sense to either do an update or either do a get the details, do an update, or do a delete. And then it determines they're based on the HTTP verb. So it's a very smart little system. And then down here in the patterns, we have just prepended it with an API, and we're doing an include with router.urls. So it uses a standard Django URLs pattern recognition and regular expression system as it tries to figure out what it needs to do. So with that in mind, we've written basically very little code at this point to get something to work. Let's actually make it do something. So if we refresh the page, authentication credentials are required. So we log in. So now we're logged in. So if I refresh the page, we're getting all of our bitcoins. This has the bit filter on it. So if I comment that out, refresh. Now I have the 5 bitcoins that were in my database. Go in here, and I can also, it does the filtering, and it also gets my details. And if it doesn't have anything, it returns a not found. So kind of our 404 system that we had in place, so it returns back. And we've gotten a lot of that without a lot of extra effort, and a lot slimmer code and a lot more readable code. So anyway, with that, I think I ended about the time that I wanted to allow opportunity for Q&A. So, 1 second. If you want to learn more, you can go to GoDjango.com, and or you can hit me up on Twitter. @BuddyLindsey is my Twitter handle, and then you can go to my GitHub, and I'll put this code up on GitHub later today after this talk, so you can experiment with it. I have tags for the different ones, so you can kind of check them out. I also just realized I didn't show you one thing I wanted to show you. Let me back out of this. Okay. Okay, so this is a test of our view set. One thing that a coworker pointed out to a coworker kind of designed this pattern, and he's super smart developer in my opinion, and I enjoy learning from him. And this is kind of his pattern, and we kind of discussed it and came up with kind of these conclusions. And I love this, and I think it makes a lot of sense. So in order for this view set to be fully tested, we have this test system in place. We're setting up a ViewSet test we're instantiating the new ViewSet, and then we're checking to make sure all of the instances that we're expecting are set on that instantiated object. We're also checking if the permission classes are set that we expect as well, and we're setting the serializer class. Again, I mean, basically we're checking all the attributes that are in this ViewSet. And if you might have noticed, I don't have the query set. That's because I haven't figured out a way to properly test that and get some sort of assertion to work. That kind of just works, and I'm like, this is good enough. Hopefully it never changes. It shouldn't. And that's the thing, is this is so bare bones enough that your view sets should very rarely ever change. And the reason we do tests like this is because in this case, we're considering these attribution, these properties, these attributes, whatever you're going to call them, as code themselves, instead of just properties on a class. And we don't want these to change. And if these do ever change, we want to be notified that they've changed. We're trusting that the view set will always work the way the view set should work. So we don't see the need to go ahead and do full integration tests to test every single scenario that views would generally do stuff. So with that, let's open up to Q&A. If anyone have any questions? We have 5 minutes left or so.
How would you go about sending an array of numbers in a get pattern using this pattern?
So that would just be a normal. So you're talking like, how would I post an array of?
No, actually, how would you do the get? I'm having an issue with that. I don't want to break the URL in a view set. How would I send it an array of numbers in the get? So we'll do a process.
I guess I'm.
Yes. No, I want to send an array of numbers. So on the get, you'll do let's say a selecting.
Okay. Okay. I mean,
how would I do that in a view set?
So you basically have a query parameter in the URL that has some set of numbers, and then you would need to process that accordingly. That would generally kind of break outside of view sets, and so you would have to do something a little more custom with your view at that point. This is kind of tightly defined to, I am sending JSON data of an object that I want to save to the database, or getting out a JSON representation of the object in the database. We need to do custom processing like that. You can jump down into and override stuff inside of the view set, but I would generally probably create a class-based view for that specific thing. And then I would actually remove the specific mix-in. If everything else is going to be the same, I would do the URL, remove the mix-in for that particular thing, and So that way it doesn't activate that verb for that view set.
Thank you.
When you're not implementing every method on a particular view set, do you assert that a method isn't present in any way?
So let me rephrase it, make sure I understand what you're saying. If I don't want to use a get, and I don't have, say, if I don't want to use a get to get a list, I wouldn't have this list model in here. That would mean that the get with no primary key, it would not activate that HTTP verb, and it would return a 404. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of how that works. Kind of automatic switching on itself. And that's kind of some of the base class-based view stuff in Django. As long as if you don't have that method on that view, then that's not going to be available, and it's going to throw an error to the user. Since that's a feature of the framework itself, it doesn't need to be tested because they have tests. They should have tests for that, and I think they do. So that's something that I don't need to worry about testing. Because it's kind of, we look at it as we don't want to test the framework, we want to test our code. It's kind of, does that make sense?
It sounds like that is the end of our Q&A. Let's thank Buddy for this wonderful information.